Welcome to the Getting Started tutorial for Plot Factory. And here I am on the dashboard, the main dashboard for my account. Let's just run through some of these basic pieces before we move away from this page. We've got 5 modules visible here on your dashboard that you will always have in these same 5 places as of the 3rd version, which was released last week. So this one you will use a lot. This helps you jump right back to the most recent story and universe you were working in. So this is a quick reference, kind of ability to leap back to pick up where you left off. This little statistics chart here is handy if you're tracking kind of your progress toward a goal. This is tracking just all-time words that you have in the program and the dates that these words were added. You'll see on here a couple of spots where I did some copy and paste. I imported some stories, and that's why it jumped up that much. Not that I wrote, a few 100,000 words in one day. Then you've got your forums here, where you can click on these to go discuss issues with people that are also using Plot Factory. And you'll see here, these forums they're active. They're not populated with hundreds of thousands of people, but there are topics being asked here, and there are people coming in and responding to them. So this is a spot to kind of get some answers, maybe a little bit more old school. We'll discuss in a little bit the Discord that is connected to Plot Factory as well, if you're willing to learn that. And here we've got, click over to the blog. This has some stories and again some tutorials and some helpful things. Not a ton of content on here, but it is coming along, and I foresee this being even cooler in the future. And feedback. This is where you can make suggestions if you run into a bug report. Jeff is pretty responsive on here as far as hearing these things and implementing them pretty quickly if there's something that you really need, and there's a ton of people, or at least several people that are suggesting the same thing. It'll typically get done. You'll also, I'll just go over real quickly here on your dashboard as you get started with Plot Factory. You've got announcements here. You've got notifications here, both helpful if things are, like the recent release that have come out. And here is where if you have the free version or whatever, you've got your ability to kind of upgrade your plan there. In addition to that, you'll see underneath your name, you can go to your account. There is a couple of helpful things here that I will point out that you'll want to do as you get started. You can put in bio and pen name and stuff like that. I actually haven't even finished this information yet. I see this information becoming more and more useful and necessary, possibly if Plot Factory moves into having more kind of pre-matter and post-matter and kind of manuscript formatting. Then there might be stuff in here where you might want to input things that would then be read into the creation and generation of your manuscripts. None of that stuff is really happening as of now. Here, preferences. This is something that you'll want to come and check out for 2 main reasons. If you like operating in kind of a night or dark mode, this is the spot where you come and change that. And this is also, if you want automatic backups to occur, you can connect your Dropbox account here. So those are some things that you'll want to be aware of. Here's where you come and manage changing your password if you need to, billing stuff, or where you can delete your account, and it'll ask you to, there's a 2-step security process in this that makes it fairly secure. You can't just do it on accident. So those are some stuff you'll want to know about there. At any point, if you are anywhere else in the program, clicking on this icon will always bring you back to this dashboard page. Now, I'm not really going to touch too much on these bottom 3 aspects on the main menu here. This community chat I mentioned earlier, if you click this, it will actually take you over to the Discord where you can sign up for the Discord group. that Plot Factory has going. If you're not familiar with Discord, this is a ton of stuff to get used to and to figure out, and we'll have to do that in another tutorial. The questionnaires and character sheets I'm going to skip over for now, not necessary for getting started. The main thing you need to know about Plot Factory is that it is built on a universe and story structure. So meaning you're going to want stories that you create in Plot Factory to exist within a universe. And so this is where I would recommend getting started if you have any sort of idea of what your universe is. If you're writing in, essentially Earth and a real world, then this might not be as critical for you. But if you're writing fantasy or science fiction in a world that is not matched with real life, this is a very useful place to start. There is a hot button here on the main dashboard to come in and create a universe. You can click that and it just automatically opens up a new one, and you can create this, put in the title, put in your summary. This is my universe. Wahahaha. And again, this is up to you how much you want to use all of this stuff, but the general way that all of these properties work in Plot Factory is that it will suggest some titles to these properties in this side, and then it will give you space over here to fill out the detail for it over here. So let's say we're doing something in 2022, and the theme is world domination. Or you could come over here and say, I'm not really interested in the laws, but I'm going to come over here and I'm going to change this to factions, and I'm being super creative here. The dominators will be one of the factions. If you wanted to create so for something like factions, I could add a list property instead of just a text one. And then over here, I could add the dominators, and then I can keep adding more items to my list. The passives, they're really going to do well in my world domination universe here. So 2 different types, text, list. The list just gives you multiple items that you can add to each of these properties. So pretty easy. If you need to delete one, you can just delete them. It's not going to give you a confirmation on that, so make sure you don't click that unless you want to do it. Dragging and dropping them around, it's all pretty flexible. You can come over here and set your themes. This has gotten a little bit more inclusive over the last month. There's still, as you'll see, a sort of limited number of genres to select here. Maybe some more will get added to that in the future. This doesn't really do anything currently other than just help you think and organize in your own brain to make sure that you're writing toward some genre or another. But down the road, if there is some formatting properties or abilities added to Plot Factory, then these things might have more function. You can click up here on this box in order to add an image. I don't know if I have any immediately available cool images. It will just automatically crop whatever you select into this sort of 2:3 proportion for a cover. Now you'll notice once I clicked into and created a universe, it added this universe tab over here on the left. So I can click main menu, and these are the same ones that we had when we started. Once I created a universe, it gives me this universe tab. And so now I'm tracking not all my stories, just the stories within this universe. Right now I have none. I can click on this button and I can begin my story. So this, again, pretty straightforward. Fill out your fields as you want, and add content to the bubble down here. Undo, redo. This is a helpful little, you can select POV characters. Of course, I haven't added any characters yet. to this world or to this story, so there's no POV characters for me to add. You'll see over here on the right your navigation. This will be more helpful for us to check all this stuff out in a world that I have already built. So for now, let's jump back over here and let's select a universe that I already have built out. So let's go into Schism 8. Here, you'll again see my universe for Schism 8 here, and then all of my stories here. So I have several stories that I'm working on in this universe already. And I now click on the Characters tab. These are the characters that I have added not to my entire account, but these are characters that are only in this universe. So characters in my other universes will not show up here. These are characters for my Schism 8 universe. If I click on one of these, well, this one isn't filled out. So we've got a kind of classic map here, so I can go back to characters. Let's see, here's one of my main characters. This is a multiverse, and so you'll often see one of the things that I'm keeping track of is multiple names, because they've got different names in different universes. Now, one of the things that I want to point out here, this is where this ability back on your main page will come in handy. You can actually create a template, and I have a Schism 8 character template that automatically starts with all the fields and properties that I want in it. So if I go back to a Schism 8 story, now I'm back in the Schism 8 world. Actually, let me stick with the navigation that I was using. The easiest way to do this would be go back to recent, and we were in the Schism 8 world. So this is where we left off, my universe, my stories within the Schism 8 world, my characters within the Schism 8 world, my places within the Schism 8 world. How did we end up in Untitled Universe? Oh, I clicked on, my apologies. That was my old Schism 8. This is my new Schism 8. You will not have multiple worlds named the same thing. So the stories, characters, places, similar to the characters, if I select one of these, I have a ton of background that I filled in on the places, and then just which series, just a few little properties that I've added to them. This is all flexible. Again, you can add whatever you want into these things. Objects, I think objects might ultimately be faded out in favor of elements. And then notes. So you can add these different things. If we come back to the stories, and let's click on one of these stories. Now you're going to see that this Universe tab has changed to Story. Main menu is still here. We can go back to where we started. Story now allows us to navigate all of these elements within the specific story. So we've narrowed this from world, from universe to story. So now if I click back on characters, these are the characters that are only that appear in this particular story, Awakened. They do not. This does not list the characters that appear in my other stories within this Schism 8 universe. So this is narrowing it down every time you go into a smaller bucket. Same for places. There's only 2 places involved in this story. Elements, notes. So you notice under notes for the universe, it did not include any. It didn't include the notes that I had for the story. And I didn't have any general notes for the entire universe. This shows the specific notes for this story. And I've just been using notes basically for research links. So that's where I keep those. Statistics, this shows the chart that's on the main dashboard, as well as giving you a little bit more information on word count breakdown in the scenes. This most used words and phrases, I haven't tried this again since version 3 was released. I'll have to do another video and see whether or not that is working better than it was in version 2. I had not very good results in trying to utilize this with the last version. But I will do another version, another test, another tutorial on that in the days and weeks to come. So now let's just jump over to the editor real quick, now that we've kind of, let's cover outlines and plots again on the story level. If you are an outliner and you want to start in your outlining before you get to work on the actual narrative, there's a couple of different options you have in Plot Factory. Outlines is a fairly basic sort of outlining ability. Just create a title, information, title, information. I have not really been utilizing outlines. This is not exactly how my brain works. You also have what is called plots now, which I think in the last version was called Plot Summarizer, or Plot Organizer, I think. It's now just called plots. This is a little bit more how my brain works, so this is another option for outlining where you kind of create a bucket then with smaller buckets underneath it, kind of a little folder system type of thing. And since I use episode and scene language, you'll see where I've kind of created a general episode 1, and then scenes, and then episode 2, some notes on some general notes for that episode, and then my scenes. And some of these I even put in some kind of narrative or some dialogue as I was kind of making my notes that occurred to me. But there's a new thing that I'll show you in version 3 called the Beats mode, where you can also do your planning, and that's the one that I am utilizing now and will be utilizing moving forward. So the General tab, again, just allows you to add a little bit of general information to your story, much in the same way that we did to our universe. And now the Writing tab. So here I can now show you, you can select a POV character. Since I have characters in this world, this is a first person. Every single POV is this character, so I've already selected that. And you can see a better example now over here of where we've got chapters and scenes that you can navigate to quickly on this sidebar to get down to the end, or to jump around, or to get to wherever you need to be. The top bar that was in the old version for your rich text stuff has been replaced now with a simple bottom bar and kind of a highlight feature. So if I highlight text, that's when you'll see now your options to bold and italic and underline, to set some headers, to insert lines, change colors, and some of that type of thing are now available only when you use the highlighting feature. And then on the bottom, you'll see your word count for the entire project, for the chapter that you're in. And then here you'll see the word count for each individual scene. Other things you'll want to know about. This is what you can click on if you want this content actually read back to you, which is really a fun way to do your editing after you've done your first or second or third draft. Have it read back to you to find pacing mistakes or errors. Here's where you would add a new chapter or an extra scene. You can also add a new chapter up here. It's going to add that at this spot in the text. And so a nice thing on this most recent update, if I realize I need to add a new scene up here, I don't have to add it to the bottom of the text and then move it up here. I can click it and I can add the scene right where I want it. Very handy. Now, this is what I was talking about before with the outlining. They now have Beats mode, which this is linking you to the notes, kind of outlining, planning side of the same buckets you've already created for your narrative content. So you only have to create these kind of chapter and scene buckets once, which is what I love. Whether you want to create them first in Beats mode and do your outlining here first. And so title, and then you can come in and add your notes overall for the chapter, which this was just added. So the version 3 that dropped last week did not have this, but it now is here because it was requested. So you can have notes for your chapter, and then you can come in and have specific sort of quick synopsis notes for each of your scenes. So if you do a lot of heavy planning, this might not work for you, because this is designed to have a fairly quick, one paragraph or less sort of beat notes on each scene and chapter. This fits what I like to do. And if you start here, then you're going to have just a bunch of empty chapters when you go back to your story. You'll have the names of the chapters, and you'll have a bunch of empty scenes that will just be waiting here for you to input narrative content into, but the notes will be there in the beats planner. Or if you start here and start writing and then want to go over and add notes as you go, then the buckets will already be here. As you see, I did my narration, my narrative writing, and actually I was using the plot organizer over here, and so now these notes have not been filled back in here. And if I want to see the narrative that's already in this scene, I can actually come over here, I can click on this, and now it's showing me the actual narrative below where I make my notes. And so if you have the narrative already in place, you can see it while you're adding your notes. Okay, and additional things you're going to need from these the toolbar here. Drafts and versioning. I only have one draft so far, so this doesn't really allow me to select anything in addition. But you can create multiple drafts in this version of Plot Factory, and use that either just to keep a record of your first draft and what it was like before you started on your second draft, or if you want to get crazy and do something experimental, you can save, draft 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever, and then try something, see if it works. If you don't like it, you can go back and select the older draft and start up where you left off before the experiment. So that just gives you a little more option. Export we'll go into in another tutorial. Search and replace. The functionality here is still fairly simplistic. This is something that has been requested to give you more complexity here, so that you can actually go through and see every instance of a word. In some cases, you might just want to search for a word that you overuse, but you don't want to replace it every single time you use it. You just want to replace it half the time you use it. So you don't currently have that ability with Plot Factory, but you can do a quick search and replace either in the chapter you're in or all the chapters. And this is handy in the case of, say, you decide you're going to change a character's name, or you realize partway through the story or in your editing process that you've been spelling the name 2 different ways. You can search every time you misspelled the name, find it quickly, and replace it with the proper spelling here. Things like that. Quite handy. And then here, if you, unlike me, if you actually have the ability to remember at the beginning of every writing session to use this and set your goal, you can come in here and set a writing goal for a particular session, and it will keep track of that for you. I always forget to do this, so it's why I was glad when in this latest version it updated to kind of keeping track of words per chapter and per scene, because then I can just quickly look back and be like, okay, I wrote these 3 scenes today, that adds up to roughly this many words, cool, I've done my limit. And that way you don't have to remember to set the session goal before you start. And I haven't really used the name generator yet, but if you want help coming up with names, that can be a fun tool. Here, there's some things that were a little bit harder to find and some new things. Typewriter mode was just added in this third version. What this means I'll show you in just a second. Paragraph indentation, I have this on. because I like to write with paragraph indentations. Space between paragraphs, I have this on, and so that's why you can see that there's a larger space in between the paragraphs than between the lines within the paragraph. And preferred font size, I think the default was 16. I changed it to 18 because I like my text to be a little bit bigger. You know, I'm getting up there in years, so my eyes, I'm trying to put as little strain on them as possible since I'm in front of the screen all the time. Typewriter mode is what you will see if I go back down to the end of my story here and start adding blank spaces. You'll see how my page scrolls up with me so that my cursor remains somewhat in this sort of like 2/3 of the way down area instead of my cursor ending up at the very bottom of the screen. This is a great addition. Jeff listened to what people were asking for and added this so that we no longer have to kind of add, you know, extra dead scenes at the end so that we can be writing higher up in the screen. Now, you can use the typewriter mode. It will not be on by default though, so you have to find it by clicking on this gear and then clicking it on if you want to utilize that. So that is it as far as getting started with Plot Factory. That's pretty much everything you need to know in order to get in, structure your universe and your story, start your outlining or your planning, create some characters and places, do some world building if you prefer to do that first, and start on your narrative. Everything you kind of need to know. So check back for more tutorials. I'll be making a bunch in the days to come. Until then, happy writing.